Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cammy Bell. I am your host on Extra this week, as always. And before I do my introduction of my guest, let me first apologise for the delay in the show coming out. I'd love to be able to say it was due to technical problems or anything else like that. The simple fact is I wasn't able to get in from the house from Ibrox until about 2 hours later because they decided to close the M8, which added on a wonderful detour onto my trip home. And frankly, I was knackered by the time that I got back. So we're doing it tonight on Friday night. And I started off in flagship at the beginning of the week with one of our elder statesmen, Mr. Alan Bradley. So I thought I'd average out the age of the podders on our free shows this week by having young Mr. Ross Hutton join me. Ross, thank you very much for coming on. I've got us down to probably an average age of, I would say, about 35.
I always like to say that I bring the average age down and the average hairline up on this podcast. That's kind of my role here. But no, thank you very, very much for having me, mate. It's a wonderful way to spend a Friday night, if not a wonderful topic of conversation. So thank you very much for having me.
Yes, indeed. And we are obviously going to talk about the 2-0 loss to Roma in the Europa League last night at Ibrox. A game, it's fair to say, pretty much went how I was expecting it to, Ross, in terms of the result. Maybe I would have taken 2-0 beforehand, if I'm being honest, but I always like to remain optimistic these things, and it's maybe the sentimentality in me of, Rangers on a Europa League night on a Thursday at Ibrox, what can it conjure? And the answer is not much, aside from some interesting protests towards some of the board, which we will obviously talk about shortly. Ross, what's been your kind of takeaway now that we've had 24 hours to digest what I think overall was a pretty disappointing performance from Rangers, certainly in the first half?
Yeah, I think coming off the game last Sunday against Celtic, it was the last thing that this squad needed. And if Danny Rowe was probably honest with himself and with us, he would have admitted himself it's the last thing that he could have needed as well. Coming off of a result like that and a performance like that, in a lot of ways, you want to be able to just get back on the horse as soon as possible. And Roma in the Europa League is not the kind of game that provides you with that easy opportunity, is it? So going into last night, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I don't think expectations were anything near what they might have been over the past couple of years. Ibrox is not a fortress in Europe anymore, and we are not a force in Europe anymore. I think that's a record for ourselves now, 7 European defeats in a row, including the qualifiers. This is not long off the back of that record being set about a lack of away clean sheets in over a year, so we're breaking all the wrong records for all the wrong reasons at the minute. But, you were right as well. You go into it with a hope, if not the expectation. You do sort of think, well, if we can be organised, control the ball, maybe nick an early goal, then we'll see what it can do for us. But I don't think Roma got out of second gear at all last night. And even when in the second half we were maybe trying to push, and I'm being generous there, but push for a goal to get us back into the game, I did still have the inclination that even if we did get that, Roma would probably just run out the park and score. They had levels to go up, and that's the frustration for me, because I can completely accept a side with the quality that Roma have coming to Ibrox and winning. It's never a nice feeling, but I can accept that it's going to happen. I know where we are in terms of the kind of European food chain. So you can get beat by good teams at times, right? It's football, stuff like that happens. What rankles with me is the nature of the defeat last night, because Rangers in Europe before, even if we would get beat at Ibrox off of better teams, we would always be competitive with them, and we would always fancy a Rangers team to go toe-to-toe and be competitive. Might not always come out, but would be in the game. Never for 1 second got that impression last night, Cammy. As I said, I feel as though Roma had gears to go up, and the fact that they scored 2 very, very frustratingly simple goals within the first 40 minutes completely killed the mood in the stadium, killed the atmosphere, what little there was. I do want to give a shout out to the UB for the fantastic tifo. It was the best part of the night. It's an old-timer. But I think that for me sums up Rangers very neatly right now, Cam. You've got fans with a fantastic display in the stands, and then players who cannot put in a tenth of that display on the park, and that's just where we are at the minute.
Yeah, someone said to me yesterday, I wish our defence was as organised as the UB tifos, and they're 100% right. It was, a great display by the UBs as well, and we're going to talk about some other banners that were brought out yesterday as well, Ross. But listen, I agree, there's probably been elements where I think I'm nostalgic about some of the teams that we've been able to beat at Ibrox, where you'd thought this will be a tough one tonight. and Rangers teams of the past have been able to step up their game, perform really well, and we had that yin-yang thing under Gerrard and Van Bronckhorst, where domestically we had issues, but on European nights we turned into a different beast entirely. And this Rangers team, for a team that lacks consistency, that is the one thing that they are consistent at in terms of making our own mistakes, causing our own problems. And the first goal, again, I can accept the fact that you are playing against, and Roma are a big team. You know, they are physically large. So I can kind of expect that to an extent, but the simple fact is there was at least two, if not three, Roma players who were able to nod that ball in at the back post. We are woefully inept at being able to try and get set up defensively for defending corners. And it's not just corners; it's set plays, as we've seen with free kicks being able to come into our area as well. And it is back to that conversation. I think David and I had it on our Patreon site during one of the daily updates this week, where you don't know which area of this team that right now is the priority. The defence looks like it met, 20 minutes before kickoff. The midfield is so inconsistent in its approach, and we are now past Guy Fawkes night, and we still can't tell you what our best midfield selections are from the beginning of this season. And up front, we are anemic, and it's a huge concern. And I think that I was brought up on you have to be able to solidify what's happening at the back. So that for me would be the obvious area of which we need to be able to try and direct our attention towards, or Danny Rule has to be able to direct his attention towards. The second goal, as you say, is basic ball watching. John Souttar has no idea where anyone else in terms of an orange shirt is going to be, and it's a clinical but simplistic finish for Roma to go 2-0 ahead. And as per usual, Rangers, I don't mind us getting beaten by quality. That was the point that you were making earlier on. But when you allow your opponents these opportunities by negligence, by switching off and being lackadaisical about who is supposed to do what within the box, and if you let your man go, and especially at this level, you are going to get punished for it. And at 2-0, I felt Roma, they had another gear they could have went into. If we'd maybe given them a bloody nose by getting a goal back, that seemed pretty unlikely given some of the chances that we're missing. But more or less anything else from that perspective was just always going to be the case that we just weren't going to be strong enough to be able to keep them out. And that's the frustration part for me, where I'm happy for us to be able to sit and defend stoically and be able to set up appropriately. And it has been a bit of a battering, and maybe they squeeze a 1-0 or a 2-0 because they've had to break us down. But we were there for the taking last night because, like you say, it's a defence that just does not have a clue what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, they were really playing all the hits last night. I mean, the thing with the first goal, you're right to point out that Roma are a big physical side. We were all talking about it before the game, and certainly a lot of people around me were talking about it at the game, actually, when they were lining up for that corner. But in the build-up to that corner, you've got Mahoma down the left-hand side. It's a daft pass that he makes. I'm not sure Giga really needs to miscontrol the ball to put that one out for a corner, so you've got a screw-up and a point of failure there initially. And then the ball comes in. We don't win the first ball. We're nowhere near the first ball. And then I think the only Roman not lining up at the back post was Julius Caesar. There was that many of them coming in. So you've missed the first ball. You're nowhere near the second ball, and you're going to get punished for it. But that's a theme of this Rangers side, defending set pieces. It's not just a one-off. And I think as a fan, that's the thing that really, really frustrates you, is when you see mistakes like that being made, but then being made continually. Conceded from a corner against Kelly a couple of weeks ago, conceded from a corner against Celtic, and then conceded from a corner again against Roma. And like you said, you can almost accept if Roma are playing through you and they're playing 1-2 touch passes and they really cut you open and score a quality goal at this level against that quality of opposition. That can happen. It's therefore unacceptable to be then losing those kind of goals, because you're immediately putting yourself behind the 8 ball. The second goal as well, Souttar has no idea where I think it's Dobvik is. Absolutely no idea where he is. There's no concept of his surroundings and the danger that could be posed by that. And then, of course, he lays it off, and it's a simple finish. It's a good finish. It's a clinical finish, but it is a simple finish, as I said, because we're nowhere near him either. And at that point, you're so far behind it because there's nobody sitting in Ibrox yesterday saying, oh yeah, we're going to score 2 here. We might have been lucky to nick 1 back, but there's no confidence in our attacking players that we can go and then hit them with a 1-2 and actually get ourselves back level and back into the game. And this is where we find ourselves. We have no quality output up front that can bail your defence out if they're having a howler. And then there's no solidity at the back that can bail your attacking players out by taking the burden off them. So the attacking players know, we'll be fine today, so I only need to score 1. So you've got a nonsense at both ends of the pitch, and that's just a recipe for disaster. And the thing is, and this is really the crux of the whole thing, Cammy, as we keep talking about this squad and the bin fire that it is, and Danny Rowe just having to limp through to January any which way that he can, nobody has any confidence that the man in charge of actually recruiting in January, Kevin Thelwell, is going to get that right. Why would you? So essentially what we're doing is we're now just trying to get through to the January transfer window to then hand the matchbox back to the arsonist. It's not going to work. It can't continue. And then that was the crux of the protest last night, which is against Kevin Thelwell, probably the most visceral and angry I've heard it so far.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. We'll talk about that actually just now. I'm going to come on and talk about Yusuf Chermiti in just a moment because I definitely think that's worthy of discussion. But yeah, for anyone unaware, there was a couple of banners that were put up in the midsection in the Govan last night, which effectively were directed at the executive board. Obviously Andrew Kavanagh was in attendance last night, and looking at, as I say, some vitriol aimed towards predominantly Kevin Thelwell. Patrick Stewart got a bit of it as well, but I would like to say it's the first time I've heard that, directed towards a non-manager, a non-playing member of staff, but I've heard a few of them before during some of our darker days in our recent history. But the simple fact is, Ross, you've hit the nail on the head. My immediate concern, and I think the concern of a lot of people listening to this, is I'm not a huge fan of being able to direct your anger towards a specific individual because I always think about the human element of it. But the simple fact that we are in this position is because, as far as I'm concerned, a lack of humility from Kevin Thelwell, a lack of direction from the board in the hiring of his son, who is coming under fire purely for being related to Kevin Thelwell. And as you get into, and you've seen probably some of these reports that have surfaced in social media, when you look at Thelwell Jr. and his track record, it does not make for good reading. So the challenge I think most people have at the moment is why Rangers are not acting on what we can see with our eyes in terms of some really, really disappointing signings. Chermiti, I think, has become the lightning rod because of the transfer fee. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong because of what we have seen from him. And as I say, I will touch on him in a minute because I definitely think there's something in there that I want to say about him. But the other signings who have not come into it, and we were discussing in our kind of heart and hand group last night, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was that said it, but ultimately we've assembled a squad of squad players. And I think it's a perfect description because there isn't anyone in there who wants and desires the responsibility to be able to have an uplift in this squad. I will give an exclusion to that to Jack Butland, who has got a limited sphere of influence for what the hell is going on in front of him because he's pulled out some tremendous saves across the course of the season. James Tavernier, I thought, for me, was our best player in the game on Sunday. Had to play in a multitude of positions and did well across a lot of them. Obviously scored a high pressure penalty, and then in extra time it pretty much runs its race because of the man disadvantage. However, all of that taken into account, the simple fact just now is we are not strong enough. We are not domineering enough in terms of the tackle. We won't win second balls. We look as if we are so disorganised and patches across the team. There's a quality issue, a major quality issue. And I don't think anyone listening to this who's watched Rangers so far across the course of this season would ever think that you and I are talking about this in comparison to a Roma team. But when you've seen us lose to Dundee, when you've seen us, drop points against European teams that in previous circumstances we would have wiped the floor with, there are players within this team who frankly don't deserve to be here. And that is an overriding concern of mine, and a lot of people I've spoken to, that you are now going to spend good money after bad, because if Kavanagh feels the way how things are going to now that Kevin Thewell deserves to be able to get a transfer kitty to fire up the wall, it will just be the same rinse and repeat. And I don't even believe that if Kevin Thewell was to sign 4 good players to be able to come in, I still don't think anyone at Ibrox wants him to be able to keep his job now. I just think that the tide is too far turned.
Yeah, I think it's too far gone now as well. But you spoke earlier on about a lack of humility from Kevin Thewell. I think his biggest crime is a lack of understanding. A lack of understanding about what Rangers as a club is, how big we are, and what this club needs on a kind of day-to-day basis in terms of player recruitment. And that's how you end up with guys like, and I don't want to name check and pick on them, but I'm going to anyway, guys like Max Aarons, guys like Joe Rothwell, guys who have just came up here and gone, what on earth is this? Not understanding the size and the scale of Rangers and the demands that are put on them. Because I always think this, it's all well and good telling a player that, yeah, you need to win every week when you play for us. Because in theory, every footballer wants to win every week, right? Every fan wants to win every week. It's great in theory, but no one has ever lived and breathed that need and desire to win every week unless you have played for Rangers or supported Rangers all your life. You don't get it. So players coming up here and then being completely spooked, I think, by the reaction to some of the performances and results is all downstream from a lack of understanding about what Rangers is and what we require. We do not require EFL dross, and I'm trying not to be derogatory here, but it's a completely different challenge. I'm also not writing off that market. There's good players in it, but there's a particular skill set and an even more particular mindset that is required to play for this club and to be successful for this club. And a lot of these players simply don't have it. Now, for some of them, it's not their fault. For instance, I don't think Jada Mahoma maybe realised the scale of the challenge he was walking into. It's not his fault. He's the only left back at the club, right? Ideally, we would have been able to rotate him out the squad weeks ago, if not a month and a bit ago. But that's not his fault. But you do have, I would say, more experienced professionals in there who have just totally underestimated the scale of the challenge. But that is all downstream from Kevin Thewell thinking that he'd be able to come in, just loan and buy from a market that he's admitted that he knows well and quite likes, and then everything will be fine. That doesn't work, unfortunately, and now he's paying the price for that. And I think you're absolutely spot on there, actually, Cammy, because he could go and sign 3-4 quality players in January, and it doesn't really move the dial in terms of opinion. It might at best reset it back to zero, but he's not in any kind of positive from that point onwards. And when you're so far gone with the fans, as I think he is, then there really is no coming back from it. I think for his own good, maybe for Andrew Kavanagh's own good, he should be relieved of his duties. I'll go back to what I said earlier on. You're giving the arsonist back the matchbox. You can't trust him to do this again in January. We've already written off one half of this bin fire of a season because of the summer that he presided over. I don't want to have to write off a second half of it as well.
Yeah, and again, we'll save that for when we're talking about Dundee, because there's definitely relevance there in terms of what we can do within the league campaign as well. So, sorry.
I said, I can't wait. Brilliant.
Yeah, I know everyone loves a trip to Dundee. Yeah, listen, I think it's always interesting, because I know that when we're talking about whether or not we are shopping within the League One or Championship market, but if I was Kevin Thewell, then I would turn around and say, well, yeah, but we've also bought players from EPL clubs as well, and at high value. Now, obviously, that argument holds next to no water, because how Yusuf Chermiti was able to at one point command a £15 million fee, even in England, baffles me. But I need to talk about him because, and I'm going to potentially kill the listening figures here, Ross. And I'm going to tell any listeners that if you're listening to this whilst driving, brace yourself. I actually thought that Yusuf Chermiti looked a little bit better on Thursday night in terms of trying to win headers, reading the ball slightly better when it was coming towards him, being able to try and hold it up a little bit. I criticise him for the chance in the first half that he had where he was through at an angle. He got a break of the ball off of the 2 Roma defenders where they didn't know what it was. It was played through to him well, because I think it summed him up in a nutshell, where he was able to get a shot across the angle but didn't even test the keeper. Now, I don't think that it's an easy chance to convert, so I'd forgive him for not scoring. I can't forgive him for not being able to at least test the keeper. And he had an even worse one in the second half where for some inexplicable reason, he felt that the best thing to do when presented in a not dissimilar situation was to try and swing a left foot at it and beat the keeper at his right-hand post, which was just ridiculous when every striker worth their salt knows that you have to go across the face of goal. But as I say, I thought that there was a slight improvement. Now, I had argued on previous shows that maybe the best thing that Danny Rule can do with him right now is just try and take him back to basics. Try and say to him, look, you need to make sure that you hold the ball up there. You need to make sure that it sticks to you. If you're going in for aerial battles, then make sure that you can do whatever you can to win them. And I thought he had a better night at that. I still don't think he should be in the team. I think that there are other options that are in there in terms of potentially Danilo or even at this stage Finlay Curtis. Miovski is shit out of form at the moment as well. I have no idea what's happened to him, but he is a fraction of the player that I admired at Aberdeen. So all of that in conclusion really comes down to if Chermiti is going to feature, and if we start to see signs of improvement for him, then we're on the right track. The problem we have, Ross, is we can't wait another 4 or 5 or 6 months for him to be able to score a goal. It's just simply not acceptable. I don't believe for a single minute, and I've seen arguments about this online, so I don't believe for a single minute that Rule has been told that he has to play him. That is simply not true. However, he's now in a difficult position of, do I continue to play this guy and give him opportunities to try and get my goal and build his confidence, and maybe we see it incrementally, or is it just a case of we need to take him at the firing line and just, we have to go with something else in the meantime?
I think this is the thing, right? So, in theory, I completely agree with your point about just telling them to go back to basics, hold the ball up, try and win fouls, try and get us up the park, try and bring others into play. It's great, right? Because he's shit out of form in front of goal, has been basically for a number of years now. So, just trying to rebuild his confidence.
And yeah, sorry to interrupt just for a second, because I
Yeah.
also want to make that point a little bit clearer as well. I'm not suggesting it's acceptable, by the way. I'm
No,
not
no,
saying
yeah.
that you spend £8 million on a striker to say, yeah, actually, the best coaching I can give you right now is to be able to hold the ball up. It should be a given. I am absolutely clear on that point. But right now, based on what you are seeing with your own eyes, he can't even do that consistently.
No, I totally take your point, and that's what I was going to say. In theory, yeah, you'd absolutely be saying that to him. Just listen, let's baby steps here, brick by brick. Let's kind of rebuild you up, rebuild your confidence up to a place where maybe you do feel a wee bit more confident in front of goal. The problem is that we don't have anybody around him who's going to be chipping in with goals in the meantime. So the pressure is always going to be there in that circumstance that we as you said, Cammy, we can't wait 2, 3, 4 months for you to actually decide that you want to score some goals for Rangers. We don't have that kind of time. If Miovski was in form and he was scoring, then yeah, you can do that. If Danilo was reliable over a course of 3, 4 months, then yeah, you can maybe do that. If you had Ant-Man and Asgard and Gassama chipping in with goals, then yeah, you can do that. But because none of them are chipping in and helping, and they're partially to blame for this as well, because they're not exactly helping Trinity out here, then the pressure is on him to not only hold the ball up, not only bring others into play and win fouls and do all those things, but you need to be scoring, son. That's just a position we find ourselves in. And again, I don't want to harp on about it, but it's a damning indictment of the recruitment that he doesn't have anybody around him that can help chip in with goals. And we're talking about people helping chip in with goals so our £8 million striker can, baby step himself back into confidence, which is just an insane position to be in at this stage of the season. But that's kind of my concern for Trimiti is I thought he was okay in moments last night in terms of holding the ball up. I probably agree with you. I think you were maybe a wee bit harsh on him in the chance in the first half. You see that quite a lot from strikers where they just don't hit the target. One in the second half is completely inexcusable. I don't know what's going through his head there. But we don't have that time. And we certainly, as fans, don't have that patience. I know I don't, right? I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I don't have that patience to watch him for, the best part of 4 months into February and then decide to score a goal on Valentine's Day. I can't be waiting that long because nobody else is going to be chipping in with goals. And if we're doing that, if we're playing them week in, week out with really no output and no return, I dread to think where we're going to be because, as I said, nobody else is chipping in to help them.
And you made a point there which I think is an interesting one. Because as I mentioned before, when I think David and I were talking about this, about what was happening with Finlay Curtis, seemed to be out of the picture for a little while. Same thing seems to have happened with Lyle Cameron as well, who I think is another one who I think could contribute. Ideally, you get some game time up at Dens Park. But I can't see an issue with us then saying that if we do need to take Chermiti out of the firing line for a little bit, I've got a concern around. I mean, I've got massive concerns around Miovski because he just looks like, as I say, he's completely lost all confidence. And I've got a concern about uh, how we can rely on Danilo given his injury record. And I'm sorry to be the prophet of doom, right? But I just have to go on what I've seen and the track record thus far. I don't think anyone listening to this is going to turn around and say Danilo will be consistently fit for the remainder of the domestic campaign. So you can't pin your hopes into him. And for the reasons that we've covered, I think that the optic looks terrible if you then think that you then have to buy another striker in the January window, which I despise anyway, because the January window is very, very much hit or miss. Because I think the optic looks terrible that you're now having to spend more money in a striker because your £8 million gamble hasn't turned out and Miovski hasn't worked out either. Finlay Curtis, for me, I think deserves more game time. Now, whether or not that's starting and coming off at half time, whether or not that's again, coming on at halftime as well and being able to incrementally build up because I thought he was bright when he came on Thursday night. Difficult for him to build out, and he's playing against, good opposition that's physical. He had to take a couple of sore ones yesterday, but to his credit, he gave it back a wee bit as well. That's a good learning point for him that, he needs to make sure that he wouldn't be bullied or moved off the ball or whatever. I'm always cautious, Ross, about throwing youngsters in at the deep end because I think it's incredibly opportunistic to turn around and say, well, the lad's good enough, he should start, and I know he'll bang in goals. It's very much sink or swim at times with youth prospects. But right now, for me, I cannot understand a counter argument to say that Finlay Curtis shouldn't be playing more game time at the moment, given what we've seen from him thus far in small flashes, and the guy in front of him, frankly, is not good enough to be able to keep him out the team.
No, you're right, and Finlay Curtis hasn't put a foot wrong this season. He's actually been one of our better players when he's been playing. But again, we're sitting here after a £20 million net spend in the summer debating whether a 19-year-old should be getting more game time, a 19-year-old youth prospect, which is what Finlay Curtis really is, to be honest. It's just so damning. But in terms of where we are, and I'm going to get off my horse, but that could be boring people now. Yeah, he absolutely does. Lyle Cameron's the same, to be honest. And his omission of the kind of last few squads has been quite an eyebrow raiser. You've got players in there who have, I don't want to say been producing, but Finlay Curtis has, to be fair to him. Lyle Cameron's got a bit about him. I think I've liked what I've seen from him so far in the Rangers jersey. And you're right to say the guys in front of them are not cutting the mustard at the minute. So there is no good argument to say why Finlay Curtis couldn't be in the squad and contributing against Dundee at the weekend, or Lyle Cameron's the same, or going forward getting more game time until players stake a real solid claim for those jerseys. Then yeah, I think people who can come on and produce should absolutely be given that chance. And we're not in a position right now where we can say, oh no, we need to kind of bleed Finlay Curtis in and we need to try and manage him. And we're that desperate for output right now. And he's a guy who's given us output so far, both in Europe and domestically. So we're in a position where, yeah, I absolutely think it's not just a case that he should play it. I think he absolutely has to be involved because he is a threat. He is direct. He likes to take players on. He does all the things that we would want to see everybody else doing, and he doesn't play with that level of fear or baggage that a lot of the other players do. He doesn't carry that kind of scar tissue, not yet. Anyway, the worry is that, and we've seen it happen with so many young prospects coming through at Rangers Cammy, is that we do try and chuck him into a bin fire and he burns with the rest of them, which is the last thing I want to see because I think this boy's ceiling is so high. But again, it's just where we are right now. We are so desperate for the output. So if Danny Rowe can get him in the squad, Lyle Cameron's the same, to be fair, and get them both contributing, then we'll be a better team for it. I can't. I'm going to go back on the horse now. I just can't believe we're sitting here having this conversation after the summer spend that we've had. It's so damning.
Well, both players that you've just mentioned there in terms of Curtis and Cameron have got an opportunity to see if they can get into the squad against Dundee on Sunday afternoon, Ross, as we head on up to Dens, ideally to be able to beat Stephen Presley, because I despise Stephen Presley and I hate Dundee. And when you look at where we are sitting at just now within our league campaign, obviously it makes for interesting reading, as we know that Hearts are 14 points in front. We're 5 points behind Celtic. I am still very much of the belief that this is about who can stay the course. Of course, that's an obvious thing to be able to say when you're talking about a league campaign. But what I mean by that, in terms of both Old Firm teams are a bin fire for a number of different reasons. Hearts, at the moment just now, have got plenty of momentum. They've got a good degree of belief in terms of what they're doing. And a lot of the Hearts fans that I know living through on the East Coast, they are very much enjoying the ride at the moment. But my point to them has always been it's not about what you do at the beginning, it's how you do it in the middle and the end as well. And the end sometimes can be the most important part. I honestly feel that if Rangers are able to address some of the issues that we've discussed on this show and in previous pods, and where we can see things with our own eyes, and what we can do in January in terms of what happens with transfer coming and goings, then I still don't believe the league is insurmountable, only because I still think that Hearts will drop points. If they drop points and we can then start clawing some back, if we can get to a stage where we continue to see pressure put on Celtic because they do not like that situation. Well, I say they don't like it. They start to get into crisis times, at which point their fans then start to love it because they enjoy playing victims, and they cannot understand it when someone else is not, other than them, is playing well and looks like they're well run. I think Hearts will start to fade. As and when that happens, will obviously be incredibly interesting. But fundamentally for us, we need to help support Danny Rule in terms of getting bedded in and being able to see more of, frankly, some of the improvements that we've seen already. It's very much step 1 of 100, but it's a step in the right direction that we have been missing since he came in. And the most important thing for me now is let's start to turn the ship around for what we can do domestically. The League Cup was a huge blow, and I absolutely understand that people will still be disappointed about that. But we're not sitting here just now saying that a well-run, slick, well-oiled Celtic machine is running away with the league. So I still think that there's a lot of football still to be played, and I think that the landscape can shift quite dramatically depending on the way how a number of different results can go over the course of the next couple of months.
Yeah, just off the pitch very briefly before we actually talk about the football, I read a statement from the Union Bears just before we came on air, Cammy, saying that obviously Sunday's Remembrance Sunday and they requested a tifo in commemoration of that, and Dundee have knocked it back, saying that they're not going to allow any tifos of any description from away fans. Now, it's not a tifo of Ali McCoy's Gaza and Loudjob, it's a Remembrance Sunday tifo, so you would hope that Dundee use some common sense for a change, actually, and allow that, because I just think that's absolutely disgraceful. But anyway, sorry, moving on, I just wanted that rant in. But moving over to the on-the-pitch stuff, I actually do agree with you. There's a lot of football left to be played this season, and any team that can find consistency over a long period of time, whether that's us, Hearts or Celtic, will find themselves in a very good position in this league, because what we've had so far is a lot of teams kind of suffering death by 1,000 cuts. We're all taking points off of each other. Hearts dropped points away in Paisley. Obviously, we've done the same. Celtic got beat off Dundee a couple of weeks ago. Nobody's been overly consistent. Hearts have just been the best of a pretty bad bunch, and fair play to them. You need to give them credit where it's due. They've obviously beaten us. But if we could find some level of consistency ourselves, go on a run, then yeah, we could find ourselves in a very good position in the league. The problem is that we have looked nowhere near that. I mean, we're talking now about needing to go on the run of 7, 8, 9 wins in a row, and I don't think we've strung 7, 8, 9 passes together all season. So we're really going from 0 to 100 here. It's such a cliche to say, but I'm really taking this game by game. We're Rangers at the minute, but we do need to win. On Sunday, there really is no if, buts and maybes about it. We absolutely need to win. We had a really good result in Easter Road in the league last time out. A game that was really difficult on paper. Hibs have done really well at Easter Road in recent times. They've been scoring for fun there. They've been scoring freely. And we managed to go there and get a result. You would hope for the players that would have given them a big bit of confidence, and you'd hope that's not been shattered too much by the last 2 games. So Dundee will fancy this on Sunday. Like I said, they got a win against Celtic there a few weeks ago. Stephen Presley will have them up for it, as we know that he will. But we need to go there and just dig out a result by hook or by crook. I'm not expecting a performance far from it. I'm actually expecting a game that might be quite similar to the one we had at Easter Road, which was scrappy, not a lot of quality, but we just need to find a way to get through it. And I think for Rangers right now, that's what it's all about. And Danny Role does seem to be quite pragmatic in his approach. So you'd like to think he'll be able to identify a way in which we can just sort of get through. And it's depressing that we're sitting talking about this. I'm not expecting it to be an enjoyable time on Sunday, but they just need to find a way to get through it. And then you have a wee bit of breathing space with the international break where that will actually give Danny Role the opportunity for the first time to really sort of sit and assess how his start to life at Rangers has been, because he's just been thrown in at the deep end, right, because of how bungled the last managerial search was. So you can get through in a win, everyone goes into the international break, maybe not buzzing, but slightly happier, and it gives them breathing space to just sit and assess that. That's really all I'm looking for from Sunday, nothing fancy.
Yeah, listen, if you offer me 1-0 at the moment, I would take it and get out of Dodge, but this is where we talked about the soft entry that Russell Martin had at the beginning of the season, and we are not in a position at the moment now, given where Russell Martin has left us, to be able to say that games are a bit of a gimme and what you expect from them. But ultimately, at this stage, what it should do is, ideally, in my eyes, the result is everything. The performance can be a distant second as far as I'm concerned right now. But I think, as you've mentioned, it's also about how do we change it around? How can we look at being able to try and give some players who have deserved their opportunities? Mikey Moore's probably a good example of that, where I thought he played well in tough circumstances against Celtic. I thought he looked brighter. Against Roma, a little bit too much. I'd like him to get to the byline and be able to get the ball in first time, but he is not the only forward player that we have just now who's, as I say, just inconsistent with low levels of confidence. I think it's fair to say, but he's building that, and that's what Dundee can be, is to be able to get some of those players who ultimately have not turned in stellar performances anywhere near enough this season, and they've got to look at Sunday afternoon, as I say, as a chance to say we can start to turn things now. And with Celtic being the way they are and what's going on with them, they've obviously got a number of injury issues as well. They don't know if O'Neill is staying or going. They've got no idea what's happening with that. So therefore, I can kind of shift my focus off Hearts a little bit, because, again, I don't think Hearts will stay the course. Right now, we can't move anything beyond game to game because Rangers haven't given us enough um, evidence to be able to say that a run is in any way possible at the moment.
When you look at our league fixtures for the rest of November, you've obviously got this Sunday away to Dundee, then we're at home to Livy and at home to Falkirk, and no disrespect, you should be really looking for 9 points out of 9 there, and then that does start, baby steps again, but it does start to build confidence. The fixtures obviously turn a wee bit. In December, we've got Rugby Park, we're away to Dundee United as well, we're away to Hearts, so December's going to be a hell of a tough month, and that's when we'll really know if we actually do have anything about us at all to be able to go on a consistent run. But we need to give ourselves a platform to go into that month in as much of a positive place as we can, and that really does begin on Sunday. As I said, we had a fantastic result at Easter Road. That should be a platform to go and then use it as a springboard to jump into these games, go and win 3 games out of 3, 4 wins on the bounce in the league, and then you're hoping to go into December, which is a tough month at the best of times, in a good place. We need to be able to see that on Sunday. On Mikey Moore, actually, yeah, I've been quite impressed with him over the past few games as well. He's a good ball carrier. Mikey Moore, he gets us up the pitch, and there's not many players in the team that you would say that of. I think Gisama earlier on in the season, before his confidence was shot to bits, was really good at doing that. Mikey Moore's come in and he is actually quite good at that, so he's first name of the team sheet. And me and Sunday, he's another one, or well, really one of the only ones who's properly earned a place in that side.
Yeah, very true, very true. So we'll see what happens, and I'm hoping that Rangers can continue to build. And do you know what? I'd love just a wee bit of momentum. Let's just try and see if we can get that going. That would be just wonderful as Santa is around the corner. That will do us for Extra this week. David will be back with you on Monday on the flagship. Again, my apologies for the delay in the show coming out as well. But thank you to our executive producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening. And Ross, thank you for coming on and doing the late shift. It's much appreciated.
Always a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
if you want to hear more from us, head on over to patreon.com/Heart and Hand, where you will get all of the build-up to the weekend's game, all of our daily update shows that come out Monday to Friday with the latest Rangers news, and a whole host of other series of shows as well, which will give you all of your Rangers fixes, even if it's current day or previous eras as well. We get the whole lot over there as well, and you can get it for only a couple of quid a month. Why would you not join? So say David will be back on Monday with you all, and I'll speak to you again next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.